So this is a really interesting book I just picked up, and we're going to do a book report, me and Shmuel, Samuel B. Katz. The book is called Lucky by a writer called Alice Sebold. I'm not sure how you pronounce her name. So this story is really a book that you can't put down. First of all, because you know it's based on facts, and it describes a rape. And what better book to review on the 25th of November, which is International Violence Against Women Day. So what's very interesting about this book, it's about a student who gets raped by a black man and in Syracuse, New York. And it's really interesting because it reminds me of Atticus. And Atticus is the name of the man who defended this black man in to killing Mockingbird, was accused of assaulting a white woman. So as it turns out, interesting twist of events. But before I tell you what I've actually discovered about the writer in this book, this is a very detailed, I think it's the most detailed account of rape I've ever read, and it describes in great detail what a rape victim goes through. And what I found interesting was that it is very, very detailed. And what I found from the beginning disturbing is the fact that everybody knows that she was raped, which doesn't seem credible to me, because I think people like to have privacy when they've been through such a very difficult attack, because rape is something, I think it's very important to stress that rape is first of all an act of violence. It's first of all and foremost nothing to do with sex, as it is violence. But of course, well, I don't know if you would say it has nothing to do with sex, but it has to do with violence. And wherever violence is involved, that's the focus. Because I was just thinking now about the war in Ukraine and how women are being raped, and in other war zone situations, how women have been raped throughout history, and how it is a crime of violence and power. Men that are just despicable and the lowest of the lowest try to assert power over women by use of force, by invading their most private, intimate space. So it was very difficult to read how she struggled in great detail. I really was like being there. And then what I found was not credible is that, first of all, everybody knew about the rape, which is very odd to me. The time is 1981. And still, I don't think most people would talk about and would want to be exposed. And the second thing that I found not credible is the fact that she actually wanted to continue to live in the same place, all by herself as a student, with little support system. And then she went into describing her family, which wasn't really the greatest family. You would have expected the family to have supported her more and not to allow her to have gone back all by herself, especially since the rapist was on the loose. So this was another factor I found quite disturbing. On the one hand, she's always thinking about what would her mother, who is mentally struggling with mental issues, what would her mother, and has panic attacks, what would her mother say? Would this destroy her mother? And yet the mother, I don't know, in a way she's there for her at the end, but throughout this difficult time, she seems to be on her own with her peer group, very few support system. And the teachers in the college are very supportive, which I found also not credible. I don't know how things are over there in undergraduate. I was in graduate school in the US, and I didn't have a very intimate relationship with my professors, and I find it not very credible that professors would get involved in any way. Maybe and they all seem very understanding. And one of them actually accompanied her, and I think there's also laws about that. And I don't know, it just seemed to me, something about this story seemed to me contrived. It didn't seem to me very credible. And then she made a mistake. Okay, this is probably a spoiler, but she makes a mistake in identifying her rapist. She sees him by chance a few months later. She makes a mistake identifying him. And that's quite, should be quite a red light, would you say? We say in Hebrew red light. What would you say in English? I would say this would be quite a warning sign that she can't identify him, and she says that the number 4, number 5 guy looked like they were twins. It seems all bordering racism to me. If I was African American, I would be offended by somebody claiming that he has a twin. It's sort of like racist claim that, people of a certain ethnic origin look the same. Yeah. Anyway, and the way she just continues her life, and I don't know. On one hand, she describes very well the struggle of a person after rape and the emotions. And there's a poem which I want to read it to you, and it goes like this. She's a poet. If they caught you long, it's a poem she wrote about rape, and the fact that she actually shared it with people and read it and didn't feel like maintaining privacy in any way is also something I don't find credible, because I think most people are a little bit shy about sharing things, especially after such a traumatic experience. So this is the poem she wrote about the rape. If they caught you long enough for me to see that face again, maybe I would know your name. I could stop calling you the rapist. And start calling you John or Luke or Paul. I want to make my hatred large and whole. If they found you, I could take those solid red balls and slice them separately off. As everyone watched, I have already planned what I would do for a pleasurable kill, a slow, soft ending. First, I would kick hard and straight with the boot into you, stare while you shot quick and loose, condense a bloody pink hue. Next, I would slice out your tongue. You wouldn't curse or scream. Only a face of pain would speak for you. Your thick ignorance through. Thirdly, should I hack away those sweet cow eyes with the glass blades you made me lie down on, or should I shoot with the gun close into the knee where they say the cap shatters immediately? I picture you now, your fingers rubbing sleep from those live, blind eyes while I rise restlessly. I need the blood of your hide on my hands. I want to kill you with boot and guns and glass. I want to fuck you with knives. Come to me, come to me. Come die and lie beside me. I don't know. This poem seems pretty screwed up, to be honest. It's very violent, first of all. And I think that it's very rare that somebody's anger emerges so soon after the act of rape, because this poem had been written quite soon after she was raped. I think it takes people a long time to process an experience of rape or sexual assault, which is why so many women actually, it takes them even years to report a rape or sexual assault, and to write a poem. So much violence, so much anger. I think when you have a traumatic experience, it takes a long time till you figure out what you're feeling, if it's hate or anger, sadness, self-hatred, guilt, whatever you feel. It's just a bunch of feelings that are all together, and it takes a long time for people to sort out their feelings. And definitely when you write a poem, poetry for me is an art that is very, very direct. It's very authentic. And this poem just seems like, how do you know how you feel? Like you're angry at your rapist, but then you seem so powerful. And I would think that a person that had been raped would feel powerless, would feel very helpless. That the feeling, I mean, people do react differently to different situations for sure, but it just doesn't seem to me that it's a poem that a rape victim would write so soon after the act. I think at first probably there's shock and there's inability to understand how exactly you're feeling and the need to sort it out. So now I can tell you, and this book is very organized. There's even there's notes, questions and topics for discussion. There's an interview with the writer. It says here, the man who raped Alice was by turns brutal, bullying, concerned, and contrite. Discuss Alice's responses to him in the course of the rape. Can you understand why, when the rapist demanded that she kiss him back, Alice obliged? I don't know. This is kind of has nothing to do with the text. People are so different, probably, to how they react to an assault such as rape. I would think that's what I've read from newspapers, and that usually takes women a long time to process the rape, a long, long time, and definitely takes some time to understand how they're feeling, and probably people react differently based on their personal history. And then she also describes a woman, and it's so odd how the woman tries to kill herself, and then it's discovered that, and there's the father and her brothers, that all her brothers and her father, all of them, sexually abused her since she was a child, and the poem opened up this kind of worms for her, which I find a little bit also difficult to believe, that the entire male population of a family rapes this girl, and then she just tries to kill herself after reading a poem, and then she continues to live a life, a regular life, and just, I don't know, it just seems odd. And then another friend is raped. There's just too many rapes. Like, what is she, a rape magnet? I'm not really, I would never disrespect her unless I have to shock you. I have shocking news that I've discovered 11 months ago. The man that was accused. So this is based on a real life story, real account of Alice Sebold. I don't know how to pronounce her name. So first of all, it's not that I doubt the rape. It's just the way she describes it, the way she finds so much strength, the way she just continues to be a full-time student and just is able to go to a rape trial, the way she has no lawyer really guiding her. There's another thing as an Israeli I found weird. Her sister's studying Arabic. There's a Palestinian shopkeeper, and there's an Arab guard. There's an Arab graduate student guard, and her lawyer is of Lebanese descent. So it's like, wow, you really did stick to one ethnic origin, Arabs. It's kind of like there's so few of them in any of these fields, whether it's legal, whether it's lawyers, or whether it's I don't know, just finding coincidence. I don't know, I was like surprised that there were so many people of Arab descent in this book. She has nothing to do with them, but that's another matter. Maybe she was hinting at the Muslims, how they approach sexuality, and there's family honor, and it's a whole different topic. I'm not going to get into it, but definitely it's very different. And I think there's even a mention that they say at one point, an Arab says, or somebody says in Arab lands, it's an eye for an eye, and this person's would have had, it's a father of a rape victim, and he says in Arab countries they would have cut the man's hands and feet or legs. That's not necessarily the truth, but definitely What happens is rape victims, I think, in the Middle East, Muslim countries are the ones who pay the price because it's, they're, and the men, the rapist, I don't think they cut off their limbs, they murder them probably. They seek revenge because the woman is sort of like property, and then I think the woman is also murdered if she's been raped, and it's also disturbing cultural differences. There's a culture where they force the rape victim to marry the rapist. I don't remember exactly in which culture it is, but certainly the attitude towards rape is very different depending on the culture from which you come from. This woman is from U.S., from East Coast. Mother is Southerner. Her father's an academician. He's a professor. I just found it unrealistic the way she was able to continue her studies and, graduate on time, everything, and participate in a rape trial. Just doesn't make sense to me. I think there's a problem with people, like on the one hand, she's describing the feelings from a rape in a very realistic way, very detailed way. And she even has a professor who says memories is going to be a friend, kind of her. She's studying, taking courses in poetry and creative writing, and her professor advises her to go with details. And she likes name dropping. She drops names of famous Robert Bly and other famous poets that she studied with. And she says that one of them advises her to use memory. The more she remembers, the better it would be. And this is where I think that sometimes denial is good, sometimes to forget is a blessing, because I think it must be really difficult. And she just mentions another rape victim's attitude, which is to just deny everything happened and just continue her life, not seek to have her rapist put on trial. What I found was missing for me in this book is, like, I really didn't know who Alice was. I learned that she was beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. I kept hearing, oh, beautiful, attractive girl. She was a virgin when she was raped. Those details kept emerging, but I didn't know much about her personality in terms of what made her want to seek justice and why she didn't think of just letting it go and just going on with her life and just forgetting about everything, because that would be one way that most people would choose. What made her decide to pursue and try to have her rapist face justice and go to prison. So very disturbing detail that came out is that 11 months ago, at least that's what it appears on YouTube, this man called Broadwater, I believe. She changed the names of the people in the book, she says, in order to protect their identity. So the man that was actually accused of raping her was exonerated because apparently he served 16 years in prison for a crime he didn't do. And because they were going to make a film of Lucky, and then the film director did the research and he uncovered details that the police detectives didn't uncover, and he discovered that actually this man served time, 16 years. This African American black man was in prison 16 years doing time for a crime he didn't commit, which I had a feeling all along. I had like a gut feeling that this would be the end of the story, and I was surprised that at the end of this book, everything's great and everybody's happy and like a happy end, and she's and the rapist is found guilty on all charges, all the things he did to her, and even stealing money, $8 from her. All right. So why it's called Lucky is because they told her she's lucky she wasn't murdered. I want to say that it's a very important book to discuss, especially, it's still relevant, especially now that the man accused of Alice Sebold's rape has been exonerated, and he turns out he served time in prison for nothing. He didn't do anything. He didn't rape her. He didn't rape her. And her apology is very, I heard it's nothing. Her apology, she didn't publish anything. Like I would expect this is an old book, but I would expect her to publish something, since she's a writer, explaining how she feels, knowing that a man, an innocent African American man, and African American men are disproportionately serving time in American prisons. American prisons are full of African Americans, and there's too many cases where they've been falsely accused. There was a very famous case just recently of a man called Archie. I remember because Meghan Markle, who named her son also Archie, met with him, and the man served most of his life in prison for a crime he didn't commit. So I'm not saying all African Americans who serve time did not commit the crime, but there's just too many of them that are accused of crimes because there is this bias. And as long as people are not aware of the bias, judges, people that are part of the justice system in the U.S., as long as they're not aware of the bias that in fact exists, they're also they're African Americans also involved in more crime than the other ethnicities, but there are also a lot of African Americans that are accused falsely and even executed, as far as I know, I heard. So I would expect Alice Sebold to publish something like really immediately. I mean, my God, the man served 16 years in prison. I would like to say something personal. I was attacked by someone when I was very young, and it was sort of a nationalistic. He was a man that was Arab, and I want to say something about that. I was not raped, thank God, because I had this thought. It was an attempt to both kill me and rape me, and the fact that it didn't happen was because I said to myself, this is not going to happen. This is not going to happen. I was very determined. I was bird watching, and I was assaulted by a very young, actually, Arab man, and I was encouraged by the Israelis who showed up after it was hours and hours and hours under the threat of a stone that was going to hit my head and beaten, that I should have let it go. And I went to the police immediately as soon as I could, and I did give evidence. And what I could say is my family just pretended it never happened. I never saw a therapist. I never talked about it. For sure, it probably influenced me, but I have to say something about that fact that I never linked the young man's identity I never generalized it to all Arabs. I still, even though if we have terror attacks, I never ever generalize and think all Arabs are like this. I think there is a culture of violence, definitely more prominent in certain cultures, but I really, really never let it bother me. I never had like a fear of Arab men or women or anyone. Maybe because I only had my contact. I went to university very soon afterwards, and I actually didn't succeed that year. I was, maybe because of that, and maybe because of other reasons, I had a very difficult time that year, and then I studied psychology, maybe also in hopes to heal from that ordeal. But I studied with Arabs. I studied in Jerusalem. There were many Arab students, and I never felt fear of Arabs, even though the man who attacked me was an Arab, wanted to kill me, and I knew the motive was mostly because he was as it turned out, he was a sexual deviant man, like, what do you call it? Yeah, he attacked children, women. He was very young, but he had a history of attacking vulnerable people, and it just, I was bird watching, so it was easy to attack me because I was not paying attention to my surrounding. And normally I would have taken my dog, but I didn't take my dog because it was a bird sanctuary where it took place. Weekly, I was encouraged not to press charges. I went to the police and they caught him very soon after because I did give a very detailed account. And I want to say that a week later, I was a soldier at the time, but I didn't wear a uniform. It was during my vacation after serving in the Israeli army, and Israeli woman soldier was found murdered and raped just at that area. So I know it wasn't him because he was caught. He was caught immediately. So I felt a relief that I did complain. And what I really found it difficult and missing from this book is to talk about other people, not just yourself. Because one reason why I wanted to press charges, no, I wanted this guy caught was that I didn't want anyone else to be attacked the way I was. I was held under threat. He didn't touch me in a sexual way, but he definitely hit me with a stone, which really hurt me, and threatened me for hours and hours. And somehow I kept pushing for time and talked to him and tried to speak to him about his family, and it was really really difficult time. But I felt that he wasn't sure what he was doing. It wasn't really sexual. I think with in my case, it was more violent and maybe nationalist. He had a large stone and did hit me, my shoulder, and he beat me, but he did not try to do anything sexual to me, which was really blessing because I had this thought in my brain. I said, this is not going to happen. He's not going to rape me. He's not going to do anything to me. I'm not going to let him touch me. And I thought about how I can get away from it. And I did lose a year at the university. I was studying biology and I just couldn't do it. But I also discovered I didn't have any talent in science really. And because of the case, I thought psychology would be better because I was able to talk him out of attacking me sexually, I guess. Although I think he was pretty young. He was very young, actually. He was an extremely young guy. He was also, by the way, dark-skinned. Very dark-skinned. He had a scar. Obviously, he had a lot of problems. Anyway, I never ever felt fear of men. Quite the opposite. I find men much easier to understand, get along with than women. I still do. Never had problem with Arabs. I never generalize Arabs. I find that there are many lovely, really nice people that are Arabs. I find them also easy to talk to, whether men and women. I live in Israel and I have no problem talking to Arab people. And if we have terror attacks, I never generalize it to all Arabs. But I do think there's something definitely in the culture of the Middle East, Muslims, Arabs, the way the religious leaders, the extremist religious leaders, encourage them to perform acts of violence upon the Jewish population, which is really sad, but I also feel sad for them because I think anyone who's brainwashed to be violent is really a victim in a way. And I think people that attack are actually victims somehow along the way. A person that uses violence against another person somehow had violence used against him or is very seriously disturbed, or both. So I try to understand this, but definitely there's a rage inside of me that took a long time to figure out, and I since accumulated other traumas, whether it's living in the Middle East and seeing all kinds of violent acts and being under rocket attacks, or whether it's my family being very violent to me and psychologically, or whether it's my marriage to a violent man that I won't get into, but definitely made me think why I'm always a magnet for violent people. And I definitely think it has to do with my family of origin somehow, the law of attraction somehow, and in the way they absolutely gave me 0.0 support. I've got no support from anyone. Nobody talked about my attack ever again, ever. I felt like it was my fault for going alone without my dog, or, I never went alone without my dog anywhere. And it was a very isolated place. It was a nature reserve, and I went all by myself. But all I can say is that I always felt that I was guilty. Like, whatever, anything happened in the family, anything, it was always my fault. I always felt I was like the scapegoat for anything that went wrong, and because I was so different than my family members, my relatives, who just always had no ability to take responsibility. They had many secrets they never spoke about, and there was just a feeling that we don't talk about things, and that's what I wanted to say. Above all, the family that this woman Alice Sebold describes doesn't seem very healthy. The mother has panic attacks. She's an alcoholic, but she gets over it, which is also not very credible, because I think the people that are addicted to alcohol don't really easily get over it. And there's also talk about drugs and alcohol addictions on her part. And on one hand, it's not surprising. On the other hand, there's definitely family connection there. I never had any attraction to any substance abuse except maybe food at one point, where I had some sort of eating disorder. But that was before the attack. It had to do with my family relations and the fact that nobody talked about anything, and there was a lot of violence. Mostly for me, it was emotional, definitely verbal violence, especially from the female members of the family, which is why I guess I never had any animosity towards male. I just felt that I never suffered from men, really. So if it was like a single attack, or even being married to one man, I couldn't generalize anyone beyond that. Small statistics, it's mostly women who have caused me a lot of pain. It's my sister, who was very violent to me physically and emotionally and verbally. And whether it's my grandmother, who would talk about the Holocaust too much without thinking how I feel. Just completely going on and on and on and on with violent details. When I was a young girl, just coming to my grandmother to visit her, and just so she won't be alone on a Sabbath. Every Friday was like Holocaust Day, and it was too much for me, and I just didn't know how to say stop. That's a form of rape. I think rape is any form of abuse where you can't there's no limits. And families where there's no limits are abusive families, and that's my family background. But I'm always hopeful that there's always tikkun. We say in Hebrew, a repair, that you can repair the future. You can't repair the past, you can repair the future. And as I said, I finished this book within one day. Found it yesterday in the open public library they have in Tel Aviv, and I just couldn't stop reading it. But I'm really sad. First thing I do before I do book reports, I Google now. And thank God I did, because I can't believe that this man was actually falsely accused. So I would really hope that Alice Sebold would publish another book about how she feels knowing that a man served 16 years. Can you imagine? 16 years in prison for a crime he didn't commit because of her. And the hint should have been when she wasn't able to identify him. There's this to identify the accused. They do a lineup, and she wasn't able to identify him correctly. And that would have been a huge clue that this book was, I don't know when it was published. Let me see. It was published. Oh my God, it has such a... She also wrote a book called The Lovely Bones, also about murder and violence. 1999, it says here. So, okay, it was published in 1999. This 23 years ago, right? And the man, this happened over 40 years ago. He served 16 years. So I would expect her to publish a book called Guilty, and just to publish a book discussing what it feels like when you falsely accuse someone and the man has to spend 16 years in prison because of you. So peace, light, and love. And in this day, oh gosh, violence against women, I hope that every woman has someone who protects her, whether it's a dog or a friend or a family member. And thank you for listening to this very, very personal book review. And may all living beings be free of violence.